All right, so I have with me Ali and Gus from the Wheel Takes Pod, and I want to thank you both very much for being with us tonight. This is absolutely amazing to have you folks here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
It's
for
a
having
pleasure to
us.
be here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Did I say that? Did I say that right? Wheel Takes Pod.
That is
Yeah.
what it is called. As far as I know, there's no other way to
Okay.
pronounce it.
Okay, I pronounce everything wrong or get things wrong all the time. I have mold. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, about your podcast, where it can be found, and a little bit about what you do for work.
Yeah, sure. So the podcast called Wheel Takes Podcast. It's a first-time reader podcast. If you know Wheel Weaves, you know Wheel Reads. If you know Stuck on Arrakis, if you know, I think not a beginning, not the beginning is one of them. We're like that.
We're just plugging other people's podcasts.
There you go.
She's the first-time reader. I've read the whole thing. We're going through the books. We do 2 to 4 chapters per episode. It depends on how much is going on. And we just started Crown of Swords, so it might eventually become 6 to 8 chapters per episode, depending on how much is going on. We'll see as we get through the middle books.
We also podcast about the show.
Yes, that's the other thing.
And, I will tackle that from the perspective of someone who works in film and television.
Which is what you do.
Which is what I do.
In what capacity?
I'm a writer, but I'm also a creative executive in scripted film and television, and anything that I develop, I also come on board as a executive producer.
Mm-hmm. And I am an actor, but I have written, I have done directing. I have jumped around in the industry in different creative fields in different ways. And I study television, and I like structure, and I like reading about it. And thinking
we love
about it.
Structure on our podcast. So. We love it.
So you've heard it here, folks. These people are infinitely more qualified than I am to talk about the show in every way, shape, and form. So
I don't know about that.
We're really lucky to have them. I know the books.
We're
very
just
well,
nerds. We're just nerds.
Being a nerd is good. It's a fantastic thing.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but we love to break down the adaptation and why we think they made the decisions that they made from a business perspective and from a creative perspective. And a lot of the time it's a little bit of both, or heavily balanced one over the other, because business and the creative side are a beautiful odd couple that exist in the film and television industry.
Can't have one without the other.
You really can't.
You can't have art without the money backing it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, you can.
Wish you could.
You can. I mean, you could do like what Wallace Shawn does and do a play in his cabin for like 7 people at a time. But then you have to know that's what you're making, and you're not going to put $100,000 into it and expect to get, $1 million out of it.
Yeah. There you go. And it's not going to have prosthetic trollics.
Yeah. No.
Probably.
It will not.
Or any sort of VFX at all, really.
Mm-hmm.
No. VFX turns out very expensive. Very expensive.
Very much so. So what we're going to tackle tonight, folks, is we're going to talk a little bit about the show. We'll talk about the first season a bit. I want to let everybody at home know that there is going to be spoilers in what we're talking about this evening. So, spoiler warning, we're going to ruin parts of the first season of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show, episodes 1 through 8. And we probably will most likely ruin up to book 4 of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. That's The Shadow Rising. Because we're going to talk about plot points and character arcs in how they're going to be adapted by the show. And the main theme of tonight is runtimes and episode numbers, because we all know that the first season, there were a few issues where they cut out some things that people wanted to see. They couldn't add some things in, and there was a lot more film that we didn't actually get to see because we're seeing some deleted scenes now. And going forward for the second season, where they're adapting 2 books, they're going to need more time, we think, but we're not getting it. And then when you hit book 4, The Shadow Rising, that's the first of the big books. That's almost the same page count as book 2 and 3 combined. So what are they going to do with that? How are they going to cut it and handle it? That's what we're going to talk about this evening, and that's why I have these folks here, because they know better than me how that would happen or how it could happen. So, we can start off by talking about the first season and how successful it was, and what they did cut or keep, and how you like that.
Yeah, I mean, I understand both sides of people's feelings when it comes to what was kept, what was cut, what was changed. I want to say that first, that all feelings are valid as long as they're expressed appropriately, right? Which means not harassing people.
That is a very good way of putting it.
Yes, all feelings are valid as long as they're respectful. But I think when it comes to creating the show, the ultimate goal had to be to attract new audiences to the material, as opposed to necessarily making the fans of the existing material happy, because we will likely watch the show regardless of whether or not it is specifically for us, versus people who are approaching the material for the first time. Like I, on our podcast, like to use my mother as an example. We're trying to appeal to people like my mother, who would not watch a fantasy show unless she was very curious about it. Yes. So with tomes such as these, it is a lot of information to have to pack into a very short period of time. Thinking about TV and film in terms of length is 1 page of text for TV and film. And if you've seen a screenplay, you'll see how significantly cut down on word count it is, as opposed to a book, is about 1 minute of screen time. So in a episode of TV, you're really limited to about 60 pages. And then when it comes to the beats that you want to hit in terms of a typical TV show, we get very much into the nitty gritty of structure. But if you look at this TV show from a structural perspective, it's a pretty tight show. There's not a lot of wasted space. The way that they have to give information is super careful, right? Because they can't just do these big monologue exposition dumps, because monologues are very difficult on TV and film. So I think they had a very difficult job when they were approaching the material in terms of how to make it accessible for my mom, as an example.
I use my wife as an example because she just dislikes any fantasy show pretty much. So yeah, no, 100%.
It's for your mom, but it's not for your mom at the expense of people who have read the books. It's for your mom to bring her in with the people who have read the books, right? Because I think what can be read from the idea that we have to bring in new people is, but they don't care about John, who's read the books all these times, and they don't care about Gus and Ali, who's read the books. They're not doing it for them, and the fact that it's on screen, that's for us too. We, as a group of watchers, are not enough to justify this show's being made.
We are a very small demographic versus everyone else.
And
I think most book readers, I'd be very careful about how I say this, but most book readers understand that, but not all of them do.
Right. And I mean, out of all due respect to everyone, I more than ever, I'm going through some things on a personal level and have been reflecting a lot on like how much we need stories about regular people overcoming seemingly very difficult and bigger things than themselves. So I completely understand the intense attachment that people have to the story. And I completely respect that. I think for me, what we all have to remember too, is if we're trying to write a show for everybody, we're really trying to write a show for nobody. And so rather than say like, I misworded it, as opposed to the book fans, it's more trying to make sure that the goal of it is to invite in the people who are new to this material in a way that's accessible and friendly to them. And that's tricky when you have something so huge and massive that you have to distill down to its most essential parts.
And that's, I think, what didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, just one more thing about adaptation is that, regardless of what you're adapting, things have to, by necessity, change, right? I mean, there are plenty of people who are not happy about the much lauded Lord of the Rings books because they cut Tom Bombadil.
They moved things back and forth. They gave Arwen a plot. They gave Eowyn more. They changed. They changed things. People like to look at Lord of the Rings and say like, well, this is a perfect like line for line adaptation.
But they forget all of the changes because it's been
they forget the Battle of Helm's Deep is like this
long.
Showing you my like tiny pinched fingers, but it's a substantial part of the second movie, and it's very small in the actual books themselves. So I I think that we're always seeing having to sacrifice certain things that are beloved because they're just not plot forwarding or character forwarding, which is always what we need to be seeing on TV and film. Every scene needs to be plot or character forwarding, preferably both, because we just have such a limited amount of time. But then, I'm sorry, you go, and then I have a lot to say always. But
I think it's important because I think the lead-in question was what was successful, what wasn't in terms of time and pacing, right? Or in terms of how they did this structure to this structure. Am I miswording your? No,
that's 100% perfect. Yes.
I think another thing that's important to remember is the book is not a TV show, and that sounds trite, right? That sounds obvious, but it's not. A book is something that you can pick up and read and put down, and pick up and read and put down, and you'll probably cut from chapter to chapter. But The Eye of the World has, I think, like 50 chapters. 35 at the minimum. So you could read that in 35 installments and have a nice resolution every time. And you can take 3 months to do that. A television show has variably a serialized television show, which is to say one that has a single overarching story, and you can't just pull individual episodes. It's not Star Trek: The Next Generation. You can't just pull out a single episode and watch it.
It's not an episodic show. It's a serialized show.
You really have to watch that in as many installments as there are episodes at the outside. What is the green screen doing? I don't know why it's doing that. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it.
It's a bubble of evil.
It's a bubble of evil.
So when we look at how they translated page time to runtime, they had to be very picky and choosy about how they went about that. Because I think certainly there was room for 10, you could have had 10 episodes, right? You could have had 10 1-hour episodes because you can have 10 little climaxes in The Eye of the World. Can you have 15? I don't think there's enough in book 1 to justify 15 episodes.
And you to be fair, really see that.
No, and to be fair, and this is going to, people who watch my channel know anyway, but anybody new to the channel, you're probably not going to like this, but to be fair, The Eye of the World was a messy book. It really was. It didn't know what it wanted to be. It didn't know if it wanted to be a trilogy or if it wanted to be a standalone or if it wanted to be part of a larger thing. And I don't think Robert Jordan knew that until later.
And there are a lot of things that get introduced in The Eye of the World that he never revisits or doesn't, or at least not where we're at in the books, that, I've heard called like Eye of the Worldisms as an explanation.
Moraine staff, things like that. Sorry, go ahead, John.
So I think we can all agree that the first season had challenges with pacing and some of the editing and things that they did. But overall, they did a great job, even barring the fact that an actor walked out, even barring the fact they had COVID restrictions, even barring all of that. They did a fairly good job.
They lost locations, they lost practical effects, they lost stunt actors.
Yeah,
they lost.
They lost a lot, and their budget didn't increase to try to cover that.
Yeah. No, COVID was devastating for a lot of productions.
Yes. So going forward, where we have season 2 will be 8 episodes again, slightly longer. If you folks don't know that Rafe had mentioned his Q&A that they will be a little bit longer. It's longer runtimes. I don't believe he's talking 15-20 minutes. I believe he's talking maybe a few minutes at most. But still 8 episodes, and you're covering parts of 3 books, because he said we're going to have parts of 1, parts of 2, and parts of 3. Still fairly easy to cut up, I think, because there are some major things there, and there's some redundancies. So you've read the first 7 books, so you know about the books, so I can talk about these ones. But you have 2 battles against a Shamael. That doesn't need to happen, and it shouldn't, because it was kind of redundant.
We can truncate that into one. Repeat beats and all of that is what we're trying to avoid. Are we still on that last question? Because I did have some things I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Or are we moving on? It's okay if we're moving on.
No.
But we get into a lot of the nitty gritty about structure. And when you're looking at the show, it is actually it is a very well structured show. The first episode being very much the inciting incident episode, the why we're here, inviting the audience in. I think it's really important that they introduced the plot question of who is the Dragon Reborn as a means to hook the viewer, because when you're reading The Eye of the World, I pretty much right off the bat went, well, the Dragon Reborn is the narrator, obviously. It's pretty obvious from the get-go. I hate to tell you this, narrator boy, but you are the Dragon Reborn. Versus what was very delightful to me was my mom thought Layla for the first episode was the Dragon Reborn.
And that's when I watched it with my family, a lot of them are like, well, is it Nynaeve? Is it Egwene? Because they did that on purpose. They gave more mystery to it, even though the book readers, we all knew. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, reading the book, you knew by halfway through the book that it was Rand. He was the dragon. That's just the way it was.
I knew in the first chapter, I was just like, it's the narrator boy, for sure. Just for sure. So, but one of the things that is important when it comes to creating a really well-structured season of TV is introducing some sort of plot question that keeps us watching, keeps us interested from episode to episode. The who is Drawn Draper of it all with Mad Men, as an example that I use a lot. So by introducing that plot question, they're giving us a hook that will keep us going through the exposition that they have to introduce. We will forgive being talked at and having things explained if we have something to discover, right? So I thought that was
that's the hope anyway.
That's the hope anyway.
And that's to your point about there were some issues with pacing, so that a lot of some of the critical reception was it feels pacing's kind of weird. We're doing a lot of talking. We're doing a lot of
which was going to be a little bit inevitable.
I think the choice to hammer and punch up early the idea of like, wow, there's a mystery of one of these 5 people, who could it be, is to mitigate some of that. How successful it was, more for some than others.
To me, I really enjoyed that.
I had fun with the mystery, but I think with a series like The Wheel of Time, where we do have 200 pages before Winter Night, where we do have long swaths of time that are really beautiful to read, where people are sitting and discussing and talking about things and thinking about things, to get that information out in a visual medium, we would rather see it than hear it.
Yes, 100%. Monologues are not engaging for the audience.
Yeah, they're not visually interesting at all.
And if we can tie Egwene's exposition on how the One Power works into the question of, does this mean it's her?
There's that. It gives us something in the climax, which is typically an answer to the overarching question we've solved whatever the problem is. It's given us something to have as a climax too, by revealing that Rand is the Dragon Reborn. It's given a little more intrigue and things that will get us through that initial hump of exposition that they're going to introduce. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I think they did a good job of introducing hooks at the end of the season too, that would propel us into season 2. I think a lot of people thought of them as cliffhangers. I would argue that they're episode hook or season hooks instead. The difference there being is cliffhangers are yes or no questions. So did they survive? Yes or no? Well, and there were some of those as well, but hooks being things like the Shan chant being introduced, which introduces larger questions that could be happening for season 2. So I think they did a nice job with that. I think they also did a nice job of beefing up some of the not Rand characters. I know that Robert Jordan had said that if there were one thing that he would do differently about book 1 would be moving up the development of the side characters, especially Matt and Perrin earlier, which they definitely did do. And I think it could potentially make the Coffins a much more interesting duo when things like the Battle of the Two Rivers happens. And, we have a potential arc for those characters that never existed before. Matt Cawthon was just Abel Cawthon was just other Tam.
He was Tam 2.0, yeah.
He was Tam too. And I think this gives him maybe, and I think this actor's amazing, a little bit more to chew on. And same thing with Natty Cawthon. Good parents are not that interesting to play. No one wants to see hot Disney movies. No one wants to see hot people doing well. They just don't. No one wants to see hot people doing well. That's not why we're here to watch a story. So I do think that that's nice. I think that giving Perrin a dead wife, while I do understand the fridging feelings because I have them as well, I think it does make it expedites some of the fridging that happens in his book plot line so that it happens earlier and with more consequence than it does in the books. And it gives some of his feelings about Fail a little bit more weight and grounds it a little bit more in reality, especially as we've aged up these characters.
There's more of a reason for him to be so, I don't use the word obsessed, but
he's obsessed with her safety in a way that I feel like sometimes is unearned because she is a knife throwing badass.
Yeah. He wants to protect her at all times. And
like, granted, I'm very protective of my spouse as well, but I think especially because we've aged these characters up, we do. Well,
not really. They're acting.
I guess
they're acting older than.
Well, they're acting. They're at a point where they're acting
they're
much more mature,
emotionally aged.
They're emotionally aged up. That we have to give some of his reactions to Fail, I think, ground them in a little bit more of reality, so that I'm not sitting there tearing my hair out at some of that relationship dynamic, and that there's just a little bit more depth to it.
Okay. Right, so the last thing we talked about was Perrin and Fail and their relationship. So the next bit I want to jump to, if you guys don't mind, is I want to talk just a bit about if 8 episodes, 50 to 55 minutes, can do the rest of the book's justice without massive cuts. Now, I know we're not going to go beyond book 7, but we'll concentrate on book 4 for now, because that's going to be season 3, because we know it's already been greenlit. Season 3's been greenlit. We know it's going to cover The Shadow Rising, which is one of my favorite book, actually, which is really great. I really like Perrin's storyline in that book. I think it's mine also. Yeah, it's a lot of people's favorite book. That, or it seems to be Lord of Chaos, seem to be the 2 books that everybody seems to really like.
Yeah.
But so this is the Shadow Rising. The 3rd book is the first of the big books. So you're looking at a book that's about the same size as book 2 and 3. Not quite. It's not quite as big, but it's close. I think within 100 pages. And it has some very poignant storylines in that book. Now, the problem with the adaptation is that pure book fans will say everything has to be included, which is not true at all. Like they cut large swaths out and they have to add new things in. And I personally, I'm a huge book fan, but I also love the show. And I like the new stuff. Like, I loved episode 5 and 6 in the first season because there were new things there that I never got to see in the books. It was like reading them again for the first time, and it made me happy. I got to see the tower and the workings of the warders, which we never really get to see. And I'm looking forward to new stuff. But we're talking 8 seasons. And that's, I would say that's, since it's been mentioned so often, it's probably a hard line. Because after that, you're looking at the actors and actresses aging out, especially if the lag time between the seasons is going to be even remotely as close to 1 and 2. 8 episodes, 55 minutes. Is it possible? Is it possible to do it? Because you're looking at the last battle. That alone could be an entire season. Could be, unless they really trim it down. So for book 4, you think 8 episodes would be enough?
I think
you have Roydian, you have the Waste, you have Perrin, and those are the major beats. And there's all these other small little storylines that they'll probably cut or merge or amalgamate in some way, shape, or form. But I think we'll probably spend the bulk of season 3 in the Two Rivers and in Roydian. That's my gut feeling anyway. You think they can do it in 8 episodes while still maintaining the Forsaken as believable bad guys?
I think it's going to be a challenge for sure. I also, like you, really did love what they did with the first season. I have really enjoyed the series so far. I think they're doing really great work with it. I think it's certainly going to be a challenge. I think that there are, respectfully to Robert Jordan, moments of walking and talking and looking at stuff that that's what we call it. These chapters are walking around and looking at stuff and traveling and looking at stuff. A lot of that can be expedited quite a bit. And I think, emphasis being placed on some of those more important moments. I think that likely just due to, budget, having to hire actors, all of those things too. A lot of characters will be merged into one character.
And that kind of goes into my next point. There was an Amazon show called The Wilds. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. First season was 10 episodes. Did well. A lot of people really enjoyed it. It did really well. They picked up for second season. They decided to cut it to 8 episodes, which seems to be 8 to 50, 55 is what they like. Amazon likes. They didn't quite double the character count, but there was a lot more going on. And the show as a whole suffered. It was sort of a mess and it got canceled. So my worry is, with all of the characters in the Wheel of Time, I would rather them completely cut out characters. Just cut them right out, or merge 4 and 5 characters into one storyline rather than deal with 2 minutes on screen just for people to see it.
I think that makes perfect sense. And I think there are indications from Rafe that is the way things are. And indications from the trailer. I mean, we see Elias Machira with the Shinarans, where we would see Huron. I don't expect to see Huron. I expect Uno to take over a lot of Joyland Sandar. I think
we're not going to need Adeline and Sulin.
Yeah, we have a character named Elsa Grinwell, right? Or Elsie Penfell or something like that. And no,
Nicola Treehill.
Treehill.
Thank you, Treehill.
Nicola Treehill.
In the show, it's Elsie Treehill, and that is something that I threw out at random on Dusty Wheel about a year ago.
Gus turned to me and goes, "Do you think Rafe heard that?"
He didn't. But I had posited about a year ago that it would work to combine. Elsie Grinwell's a nothing character, right? But she's
my favorite character in the books. How dare you?
Nicola does some stuff, and she's great. It's like you take all the random girls who show up in and around the tower, you clunk them together, throw them into one. And it also, I mean, I don't know when did The Wilds? When was that released?
That was recent. I watched the first season. It was great.
Within the last 2 years, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I think something they're cognizant about now, and I want to jump back in a minute to is 8 episodes enough? Because I have a thought on that too. But I think something they're going to be really cognizant about going forward also is the state of the global economy and how much you have to pay actors.
Yep.
Yes.
And they will not want to pay more actors than they have to.
No. Which we've kind of seen is they're going with a lot of local talent. A lot of local talent. So there are a lot of people in and around Prague, especially connected to the Royal Shakespeare Company, that happen to be hired. There's people that are coming from Spain and the UK. They're hiring very few North American actors and actresses due to the main fact that I think there's a limitation of 1 or 2 that they're allowed to have. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is a...
And
probably. Yeah.
In addition, a big bulk of their writing staff are going to be UK writers now. Yep. I think in part to work around having to hire people from the WGA. Because
you pay them
and having
more,
to
obviously,
and having to adhere to WGA standards when it comes
Writers
to pay.
Guild of America.
So, not to say that. I mean, they have every right to do that, and I think that a lot of business decisions have. I talked to a lot of creative executives right now at various companies, and they've talked to me about how a lot of emphasis has gone away from the creative side and toward the financial side of things. And, we saw a big pendulum swing toward the creative side for a while. And now with things like factors like the pandemic, factors like the impending / currently happening recession, we're seeing that the financial department is coming back in a big way.
Yeah, not terribly far from the Czech Republic.
Right.
Very close.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And, we're also seeing, a lot of talent is not wanting to be hired for one episode and then having to sit for 2 seasons and then come back. There's just no guarantee if you do that actor is going to be available, because hopefully they'll be working.
Yep. And so what does that mean for really bigger actors and actresses that may be portraying important but smaller roles already in the show? So Swan, I think, for example.
Yeah, I think we're going to see either those roles get significantly expanded or take over other roles in the show. Or we could see there also is a lot of, there's a new kind of, well, it's not new, but there's a trick where, you'll hire a big name actor for a few scenes, and then, it's a very low commitment for them, and they can just pop in and out when they need to. And you just cater your shooting schedule to them and when they're available. So sometimes it's worth it with bigger named actors.
Sorry. As a, for instance, when It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia got Danny DeVito, who is one of the most important characters of that show. The season 2, which is the season he came in on, I think he only had 3 weeks to film all of his scenes. So they filmed everything else. And then they did all of Danny DeVito stuff. Bam, 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 bam. That's
what they'll do. So it'll be a very, very stressful 2 weeks, and then you're done.
I don't think Wheel of Time would do that. I don't think they are. It's structured right. But,
well, we've seen Rosamund move. She actually lives at least part of the time in Prague now. Mm-hmm. So she's billed as their main character of the show, and she's probably her and Daniel Henney would be probably, in my opinion, the 2 biggest names. So
yeah. Well, and Alvaro Morte, I would also say, is a pretty big get for them. But internationally,
his scenes far less than I expected, considering the caliber of actor he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they're having to find themselves in situations where if they cast actors of that caliber, they're either going to have to rapidly or massively expand what their character does. Like Moraine does not do enough in books 2 and 3 to warrant Rosamund Pike's talent, and time. So they're going to have to expand what Moraine does and her character in those seasons of the show. Same thing probably with Daniel Henney and Lan. Potentially with Alvaro Morte and Sophie Okanoto, they might be able to do the Danny DeVito treatment where they can just
bang, 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 all the
film them very quickly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And
they come in for a few days. They have 1 or 2 big scenes per season.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of big significant moments.
We see it later on where there's whole books where characters just are not there, at all, and might be 2 or 3 books, then they come back. And I think we've already seen the setup for that not to happen in the show with certain characters. I won't say which for spoilers, but when it comes to the outgoing seasons, if for example they decided we're going to keep 8 episodes, we're going to keep the timeline, and they can cut large swaths of different things that are happening in later books, and I won't get into them because I don't want to ruin anything, but there's some things that are very slow, that are very not interesting for TV, because people like explosions per minute.
Yeah,
I mean, realistically, they do. They like explosions per minute. Yeah. They like things that are pretty, that they look nice and they're shiny, and there's a lot of that in the books. They'll probably keep most of that. They did that. They may be able to squeeze it all into 8 seasons, but like you said earlier, it's a cost-benefit analysis. They have to look at how many viewers am I going to lose if I cut this stuff versus how much money am I going to save if, say, I only film 50-minute episodes, or perhaps only 7 or 6 episodes instead. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's going through all the executives' minds as they're hashing this out, and as much as the fans want to see everything, and a lot of us do, we're a very small portion of the actual viewers.
Right.
To go back to Lord of the Rings, you've got the theatrical cuts and you've got the extended editions. I'm not suggesting Wheel of Time's going to make an extended edition, but
I hope so.
I would watch it.
More Wheel of Time is better.
Yeah, I would watch it.
But they
are doing the little cartoons.
They're doing the origins for lore. I think the extended editions and the theatrical cuts of Lord of the Rings are both very good tellings of Lord of the Rings. One provides more grit and umami chewiness to the story, and the other one is just like, this is what you need to know. This is what you need to know.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at the 7 more seasons that we hopefully get ahead of us, and when we think about kind of the overall, how much meat is in the sandwich, it's going to be, I want to caveat what I'm about to say is that it's not a negative thing. It's going to be painful to see a lot of stuff go away. So a lot of the stuff that's going to go away in my estimation, is stuff that if you had been given the books without it, you may not have noticed its absence.
20 years from now, people won't notice it's missing, just like the Lord of the Rings movies.
Exactly.
Who is still crying about Tom Bombadil? I want to know. Are you still crying?
I also want to jumping back really. Can I jump back really quick to book 4, because I had a thought about.
Yeah.
We look at about 8 episodes, 50 to 55, if we're really lucky, 60 minutes. That's about 3 feature-length films, long feature-length films. And when I think about book 4, which I haven't read in a while, it's been about, I don't know, a year and a half we finished book 4. But when I'm thinking over book 4 and the major things that happen in book 4, I think of 3 major plot lines with a couple of little interjections in there. I think of how specific can I get? Because I don't want to get too spoilery.
For book 4?
For book 4?
Book 4, full spoilers. Full spoilers.
Yeah. Okay. I think about Rand in the Waste.
Yep.
Going to Alcair Dal, ultimately. Rodian and Alcair Dal. I think about Perrin and the Two Rivers. And I think about Nynaeve and Elaine in Tanchico. And I think to myself, could I do Rand goes to Rodian, goes to Alcair Dal as a 2.5 hour movie? Yeah, I absolutely could. That's plenty of time, right? I think about, could I do Perrin and the Battle of the Two Rivers as a 2.5 hour movie? Yeah, I could probably do it in 2, I think to myself. Could I do Tanchico as a 2-hour movie? Absolutely.
No question.
90 minutes, probably. I could do Tanchico story. So we look at book 4, and it's this beautiful, rich, heavy, gorgeous, lore-filled book. And it's got all these little bits in there, and I love them. And we think about the big stuff that we have to put in. And to me, the big stuff that we have to put in makes up like 6.5 to 7 hours, which gives us about an hour, or about 7 to 8 minutes per episode of the rest of it, right? The condiments. I'm doing sandwich with my metaphor today. I don't know why.
Another important thing to note is that a lot of the time in these early books, the first 100, 200 pages are reminding us what has happened.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We are not going to have a lot of Alana, a green sister, who has bonded Rand against his will. Oops, I didn't say that. But we're not going to get, Moraine, a blue sister, who is mysterious, and we don't know if we trust her. We already know all of that because we've seen the earlier seasons.
And you'll get your 2-minute recap at the beginning of the season to say, these are the main beats of last season. And that
will take them a few minutes tops. So it won't be 200 pages of reminding us why we're here.
I think it is about 175 to 200 pages of book. I'm not sure. I'm not looking at it right now. So but it's a lot of book 4 before they even leave the stone.
Yeah. I mean, I sat there
There's a lot of canoodling and letters and different things that happen before he leaves that are really not important to anything.
Yeah, and I sat at our dining room table because this is the kind of person I am. And I did this only for myself, but as an exercise. But I looked at everything that happens in the next 2 books, and I said, do I think that I could, knowing that 3 is going to be primarily book 3, right?
3 is going to be book 4.
Book 4. Yeah. Can I get these 2 books into 8 episodes? And I played with it and with the story beats that have to happen, right? The inciting incident, the story turn, the midpoint, the story turn again, the low point, the climax, the resolution. Can I fit this into 8 episodes? And it took several hours of my life to figure this out. And I wrote like 3 different versions of how this would go. It is possible. And I actually ended up really liking where I've decided Rafe is going to go with it. I don't know if it will actually be what he does. And I'm sure he will add things that I haven't thought of or take away things that I didn't expect and put them later or combine things that I wouldn't have necessarily thought. But like you said, the Ishamael double fight could be one fight. Right?
100% could be one fight. Could
you combine some beats of Falma and some beats of Stone of Tyr? Could you do those 2 fights at the same time? Could you do, yeah, maybe you just have a international fight happening all at one time, right? And you just split up your characters. That could totally happen. So I did play with it. it did happen. I think there are also, a lot of people would argue, some slog elements that could definitely be cut. There's portions of Lord of Chaos that I think could totally be cut.
Yep. There's portions of every book that could.
Yeah. And most of the introduction of those books, the first 200 pages, is a lot of recap and reminding us why we're here, which we don't need to do in a TV show. So yes, I do think it's possible to do in a satisfying way. We might have some heartbreak along the way.
Oh, we will. No, I mean,
we'll definitely have some heartbreak along the way.
Everybody will lose something they really wish were in the show.
Yeah.
We lost 18, 20-year-old Elsie Grinwell on the farm being ridiculous.
Which the show's dead to me.
Done.
Turned it off.
Done.
Yeah, I think it's just, and I'm
being facetious, but
yeah. And what I'm always encouraging people is just wait and see what they do with it. Wait and see if it's earned. Because if it were a TV show of Lord of the Rings, not to keep using Lord of the Rings as an example, but since it is so beloved, if you saw an episode where you're like, they skipped Tom Bombadil.
Nobody misses Tom Bombadil. No.
There were so many angry people. There were so many angry people when that movie came out about that. Like, they got letters about what about Tom Bombadil? They did get letters. And so there's always somebody, right? There's always somebody unhappy, no matter what you do. So
like I have a friend of mine. He's a writer. He's a fantasy writer, and he actually did a lot of his university studies in creative writing were around Tolkien. So he's pretty much a Tolkien expert as far as I'm concerned. And he tried to give me a rundown on what the new show Rings of Power is about. And he said a lot of people are very upset that it won't be the same, but no one knows what it is. Because
I keep going. They're going to make me podcast about this series, and I do not have the time and I do not have the energy, but it's going to happen because this is why we started podcasting about the show. I'm going to get mad about it, that everybody's having feelings that I'm going to have to address it. It's just what's going to happen. But I always encourage to just be patient, just see what they're going to do with it, because there are things that were added to the first season that people were also kind of taken aback by, like the tower stuff. But we spend so much time with the water bond and the tower and things like that later, that it is a little bit more important to set up those things right now than it is to maybe do some of the things that happened.
The wagon ride that lasted for 6 chapters.
Or Camelin. I mean, Camelin. I love the Camelin chapters. I love the Camelin chapters.
To be fair, my favorite scene in the entire series, and I'm not exaggerating. It wasn't some of the bigger battles. It wasn't some of the big twists. It was Rand falling into the Royal Gardens.
It's a great scene.
When you met Queen Morgase and they pulled open his sword and saw the Hairmark blade, and everyone was ready to die. I still, every time I read it, I get chills when I read it. I remember 9-year-old me reading that and being very excited.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't in the show, but it didn't kill the first season for me at all. It was I a little upset? Yeah, but they made it make sense. They made it make sense.
There's room for Rand to fall into a lane in other places. It might not be gone necessarily. It might not be necessarily gone. They still have to have a mute cue at some point, right?
They do.
And also anything that keeps us away from Gawain Trakand is a win.
No, you can't say that here. You can't say that here.
It's you. You're the one with the tattoo.
I am.
No, I have to know why, but we can talk about it later. I don't understand.
When we're done,
I'll explain. That's why you missed the wall. You missed Gawain.
That's right. Yes.
Well, we'll definitely get Gawain this season. And I think there's room to, I just know they're going to do it to me. They're going to make me like that boy. And I'm going to be really mad about it.
He's going to be very likable. From what I hear, he's going to be exceptionally likable. Till a certain
might
point.
retract my statement about
I can't wait.
communicating respectfully about my feelings if they do that to me. But no, I'm sure he will be very handsome and very lovely. And I also think there's room to really play with the Trakans in a way that I think sometimes is a missed opportunity in the books, because I think Gawain is a very complicated character. And I think there's a lot to chew on there. I think it will be very exciting if they do cut down on some of the other things, what they can do in terms of the complexity of the characters that they do keep.
That's something I want to say is Robert Jordan is there's architect writers and there's Gardner writers, right? You have architects who are Brandon Sanderson, they plan everything out to the ridiculous degree, and then they put it on paper, and then there you go. And Gardners see where it goes. And they have point A, point B, and point C, and they flow between them. And gardening writing is beautiful. I don't have any problem with it. You know, one of my favorite TV shows, Battlestar Galactica, was written that way. They kind of flowed and evolved from point to point. But what I think when we're thinking about adapting the Wheel of Time and putting it to now what we know we have this long. The publisher is not going to say, here's another book. What we're able to do is look at the outgrowths that Robert Jordan had, that they're pretty and I like them and they're nice, you know, and they're fun, but they go over here and then they kind of stop. And
there's a lot of them.
And I'm not suggesting we're going to cut all of them or that we should cut all of them or that it won't be hard when they go away. But when we look at the central trunk, we also have parts of that trunk that everything kind of gaps out around and goes past. And if we're making the hard choice of we have this much time, we might graft into the middle of it. I've moved from sandwiches to trees. I don't know what's happening with me today.
Your metaphors are very mixed, but I appreciate it.
But
it works.
I think I really do think that you can make it work in 8 seasons. It's hard. And when I say it's hard, it's going to be hard for us to reconcile a lot of those changes. But considering, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think they can make it work in 8 seasons if they, at the very least, stay 8 episodes, hour long-ish. If they cut below that, I think at that point, you're going to start losing valuable time with the characters you do keep.
That'll be hard.
In terms of the
very hard.
In terms of the episode length, I don't see them cutting below an hour, just because the TV standard is absolutely.
It'll be numbers of episodes. I believe,
numbers of episodes. I think it is going to depend on how the show is doing. It appears to me, based on their renewal to season 3 so quickly without the show being released,
it's doing well.
The executives are very happy with what the Wheel of Time is.
It was one of their biggest and most watched shows ever when it released. I mean, it's been dwarfed by other shows since, but it's at the time it was big, and I think season 2 will be better.
I think that
marketing notwithstanding, because they didn't market the show at all.
Right. Well, and look how well it did. And I think Great Hunt is a better book.
It's a stronger book.
A stronger book. That's a good way to put it. Is a stronger book than Eye of the World. I love Eye of the World, though I do. I think Great Hunt has a lot more of what I think of when I think of the Wheel of Time, and you know, those moments where you go, "This is why I'm reading these books."
For me, the Wheel of Time is the interaction between the characters. Yes, there's battles. Yes, there's explosions. Yes, there's magic. There's all kinds of stuff. But it's the moments between the characters and the way they interact with each other and how real some of them are. That was the whole series to me.
Yeah,
that's what I like the most about it. That it's a hard sell for TV.
Yeah, something I'm kind of excited about is the potential of. It seems like they are making the Forsaken and Loose Theron more connected based on some of the things that I've read. It seems like they're making it seems in general that they've been making all of the characters a little bit more complex. It seems like they're really strengthening the stakes of all of those characters. I think the Forsaken are going to be far more capable than we see them in the books in the initial stages.
2D in the books. White Cloaks, they were cookie cutter, same as White Cloak, cookie cutter villains. And Robert Jordan did a lot of things great, but he did not do villains well.
Right, and paring them down to the most essential Forsaken, I think is going to make them more powerful and more interesting. And it seems like they're playing with, you know, maybe a Shamayel and
Loose Theron.
Thank you. My gosh. We're best friends, right? Or something like
from
that.
That clip from the Gowan audition.
Yeah, I think there's really interesting things to play with then when it comes to Rand's relationship with all of the Two Rivers kids. If he in a past life was betrayed by the people he trusted the most, then we can really play with those relationships and the tension that sometimes is occurring between the characters during the apocalypse. I think there's room to play with Gawain and Gallad's relationship and how Gawain is always kind of second to Gallad, but Gallad saved Gawain's life. I mean, those things are so complicated. The Tricans in general, I feel like need their own reality show, to be honest.
Yes.
When it comes to unpacking that family, and the Damodreds can go in there too. So I think there is room to give us
the Real Housewives of Camelin. That's what we need.
Yeah, by trimming some of the extraneous characters, we are giving the show and the characters, the things that we love, those character interactions, more time to flourish. I mean, I thought that expanding upon Melissa and Agomar's relationship was really interesting, and it gave their characters so much more depth that they didn't have in the books.
And there was so many people upset that Bail Damon was not in the first season. Very upset about that. Very, very upset. But he really served almost no purpose in the first season, other than to introduce him. Yes.
Yeah.
Other than to introduce him.
I have a sneaking suspicion that he might be a taxi in the second season, and that might be it.
Mm-hmm.
That might be it for him forever.
I love a hot pirate. I love a hot pirate.
I don't mind a nod to
very excited about Bail Damon. But I think, there was they needed to pace themselves, especially because the first book had so much exposition to get through. I mean, even Tom didn't have a ton of time to really get established, but I understand why they didn't have him at Winternight, because what the heck does he do at Winternight?
He doesn't do much, and he wasn't available for filming anyway, so it just worked out well. So,
and we're already introducing a bunch of characters there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my mom would lose her mind. I mean, think about this. You go to a party and you meet 8 people.
You have an hour.
Are you going to remember all 8 of those people when you leave?
That's 8 people too many to me.
So. That's so many people. I don't remember one, so it's a lot to ask of people to introduce another character when you already are introducing so many people.
So we'll boil it all down here, and we'll break it down to just the very end. I don't want to keep you guys much longer, but we all sort of agree that 8 episodes should be the bare minimum, I think.
I think so, yeah.
No less than that. I think that would be great going forward, because there's a lot they can cut, there's a lot they can merge, but there's not. If they cut time, it might, the characters in the show might suffer. I believe anyway.
Yeah.
Is that something you agree to? If say they go below 8.
It's different calculus. I mean, you're telling a different story at that. I don't mean like
it's
not
abridged.
The same.
It'd be very abridged. Yeah.
We're already talking about losing most of the, not most of, we're talking about cutting off a lot of the stuff that doesn't necessarily add to the core plot. At that point, you get into like truncating core plot.
Yeah.
Which you can do. It is abridged. It is different at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think 8 episodes has become a really standard amount of episodes, 8 to 10. They wouldn't do 7. 6 is a very big cut.
20 years ago, it would have been 22 to 26.
That's true.
Listen, lots of writers are pushing for the days again of 30 episodes.
Lost.
So many people are begging for the 30 episode rooms again.
But then you run into the opposite problem where you have bottle episodes. You have
things are too bloated.
30 episodes. It's tough because pendulum. We talk about the pendulum swing between finance and artistry, and I think there's a little bit of a pendulum swing now towards like, well, what if we just made 2 movies and chopped it into parts?
Yeah.
Which sometimes can work. I think right now 3 to 4 movies and chopped into parts is kind of our sweet spot. About 8 to 10 hours.
TV and film are different.
Yeah.
That's my thing. TV and film are different.
They are.
I would
love to have YouTube back. I would love to have YouTube back when we get more information about the Wheel of Time movies. Because I will at one point or another get a chance to sit down with Zach. That'll happen at some point or another. And I would love to hear your take on what's going to happen with those movies.
I forgot about that.
Yes.
There's movies?
Oh yeah. Trilogy of movies based around the end of the Age of Legends, the founding of the White Tower.
I think it's Red.
Did
Is
not
Red Eagle?
know that.
Red Eagle, yeah. Red
That's
Eagle
cool.
owns pretty much everything.
rights,
They're the ones that optioned to Amazon and Sony anyway. But yeah, there's that. There's a lot coming that is not just the show. So there's going to be plenty of Wheel of Time, even if people don't enjoy the show. I guess is the best way to put it.
And the books are there too.
And the books will.
Books aren't going anywhere.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that if the show continues to do as well as it has, and it seems like because executives are very happy, granted, executives and finance people make weird decisions all the time. So take it with a grain of salt. Anyone who tells you that they know exactly how the film and TV industry works is a liar, because every day and in my job looks different, right? Every time I go to a production company and go, this is what you all do, they go, I don't know, we're gonna steer away from that for some reason. It's this, or I will come back to them and go, a month ago we talked and this is what you wanted. And they're like, we're actually moving in a different direction now because Squid Game is on, we're looking for dystopian things. And I'm like, but you are a comedy company. What is happening? Right. So, but what was I saying?
I don't know, but the meeting ends in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Okay. Thank you for putting me under stress.
I don't want to force you to make another.
So, I think that they would be reluctant to take time away. I think it's promising that they are potentially giving us more time based on what Rafe is saying. And 5 minutes is a long time. Try sitting in 5 minutes of silence. It is a substantial amount of time. And then multiply that by 8. It is a lot of time.
It's a lot. It's eight cave scenes with Egwene.
Yeah. So
anyway, we'll end there. I want to thank you very much for coming on the channel. Thank you so much. And everyone out there, thank you so much for sticking with us to the very end. And here's to many more.